the most important part of the call called the 3 pillars that psychologically will help pre-sell the prospect into your offer. And I want to give you 2 different examples to drive the point home. So the first example is we'll do a business offer. The second example is we'll do a fitness offer. And the reason I do those is most people understand money. Most people will understand fitness. Now, the first thing we have to do before we go through what we call the 3 pillars is understand what is it that the prospect wants. In business, it's very, very simple. They want to make as much money as possible with as little work as possible. In the perfect world, right? No one says, oh my gosh, I want to be a millionaire and work as hard as humanly possible. That usually comes with it. But in a perfect world, it's making more money with less work. And in fitness, it's very similar where they want to lose a lot of weight typically without putting in a lot of time or effort. So in fitness, we'll say lose weight is the goal. And they don't want to put in a lot of effort. So the easier it is, the better it is, right? That's why a lot of supplements right now, Ozempic, tirzepatide, all those things are super popular. Now, once we know this, then we have to think of 3 supporting reasons why someone would do this. So when we come to the business side, usually 2 of these reasons are going to be what we call USPs, unique selling propositions. And then the last one will be why they should pick you. So I'll just run you through something my company does that's been very effective for us. So the first pillar is what we would call offer creation. Now, when you make your point, you always need to do it in the format of what they do, they being the bad guys, everyone else, versus what we do. So I'll give you an example. So the first pillar is what we call offer creation. Now, most business owners come to us and they're told that they should do a low ticket offer, or they're trying to sell something for a low price, but they don't have a big following. They're not Kim Kardashian, and so they can't ever really gain traction. So what we do is we'll help bring you in, right? So that was they. Now we move to we. So what we do is we'll bring you in and we'll help you create an offer that you could sell at a premium price. Why? It's easier to get clients. You don't have to sell as many. They're better clients. You get paid more, and it actually will move the needle and change your life. So the first pillar is what we call offer creation. We want to keep you away from this and we want to do this. That is a simple explanation. It's showing people the bad side and showing them the good side. Why? Because most people don't know what the bad side looks like. So if I go into a store and I say, hey, I'm looking for the best perfume for my girlfriend, and I have 10 girls say, this is the best perfume, I'm more confused than when I walked in. But if I have a girl who says, look, these are the worst perfumes and here's why, and this is the best perfume and this is why, it builds more credibility and trust because she's showing me a comparison, which is where most sales individuals fail. So that would be pillar number 1. Now, if we go to fitness, is similar. So a pillar I could say that would support this fact, losing a bunch of weight without a lot of effort, is I could say how to eat whatever you want without sabotaging results. Now, for any of you fitness buffs out there, we usually can agree that it's calories in, calories out. So my phrasing here was eat whatever you want without sabotaging results, which means they have to stay within certain parameters, which would be caloric restriction. But notice I didn't say how to do caloric restriction or how to count your calories, because that would indicate they have to spend a lot of effort, which would lower their desire to buy. So psychologically, by saying eat whatever you want without sabotaging results, even though that is within your macros and your calories, this makes it more advantageous and more likely that they're going to want to buy because this sounds fun. This sounds a lot better than calorie counting or tracking your macros. And so this is the same thing where when we know what the objective is and what they want, then we can make these 3 pillars or these 3 reasons why we're going to be the best option. So going back to business, let's come up with a second objective. So in business, most people, as we said, want to make more money with less work. They usually have an offer issue and they usually have a lead generation issue. So a second thing I could try to say is, let's say I call it conversion conversations. Okay? Now, so for those of you who are newer to business, follow me through on this. So again, we want to use the they versus we frame. So I could say, and this is exactly how you sound on a sales call. You can use this in your marketing, etc. I could say, look, what most people do is they're going to tell you to do a webinar. Now, webinars can work, but the issue is most people, they're not going to buy on the call or they're not going to book a call. You only get 30% of those individuals who open their emails. So pretty much if they don't buy or book a call on the webinar, you lose them. What we do is something we call conversion conversations, which is a unique follow-up system of text, emails, voicemails, DMs, you name it. We do it that increases application rates by over 57%. So what I'm saying is, look, You want more leads to make more money. This mechanism, this USP, the unique selling proposition, is why if you work with us, you will get more leads than if you work with someone else. It doesn't matter what the reason is, it just has to be a good reason that they can buy. Going back to the fitness offer, another thing we want to talk about is you can train however you want without sabotaging results, okay? Sorry for my handwriting, guys. I usually type on computers now. So the reason for that is, again, if you're a fitness buff, you know that 90% of results is nutrition. 10% is training. So you can still lose weight sitting on your ass at home if you don't work out. So again, I didn't say, hey, how to train as hard as humanly possible, and I'll give you a customized workout program, which every other trainer does. I said, hey, I'm gonna teach you how to train without sabotaging results. And here's the cool part. What most people do, because again, we wanna keep the they do versus we do frame. What most people do, is they say, hey, you gotta do tons of cardio, you gotta do tons of lifting and training and all this stuff. What we do is we keep this super simple, is that you don't have to work out if you don't want to, because 90% of results is nutrition. So it's better for you if you do, but at the end of the day, as long as you do the nutrition part, you'll be healthier than 80% of people. Sound fair enough? And people buy this because it's within their boundaries. It's helping them lose weight and it's lowering their amount of effort, which is ultimately what they want. So the last pillar is then usually something about us. Now, depending on where you're at in your business, this part will vary. So for example, let's say you're selling someone against me, right? And to date, we've done about 115 million in sales. So what you would say is you go, look, most people, they'll work with Tanner, but here's the thing. If you work with Tanner, you're not working with him directly, you're working with his team, right? And his team's really not as good as him. But if you work with me, even though I'm a smallest business owner, I'm gonna work with you one-to-one and give you way more time and attention than his team could. Okay, that's something you could do if you were smaller. Now, if you're bigger, if you're like me, what would I say? I'd say, well, look, most people, they go to these types of coaches or consultants, but they've only made 10K a month. They haven't done that well. But because we've done over 150 million sales, it's more likely we could help you because we've gone through more lessons and hardships to get to that level. So we're gonna have way more experience to tell you what not to do and what to do. That would be an example. So what my team usually does in this number 3 is they're trying to get them to buy in. Here's the 2 USPs we're gonna focus on that's better than the competition. And then this third one is, why should we work with Tanner's company? And so they usually will go, look, there's 3 things you need to look at. Experience. So Tanner's done 115 million in sales. He's probably gonna be the top guy in that room. If you meet someone else who has more, go with them. Specificity, right? So especially because I've ran multiple companies. I've had a recruiting agency, I've ran a fitness company, I've done these other things. We'll focus on the fact, hey, it's better to get help from a real estate agent if you're building a real estate company than if you get help from a fitness coach, and vice versa. The specificities in there. I'll usually use a Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods analogy where I'll say, you don't want Michael Jordan teaching you golf, you don't want Tiger Woods teaching you basketball, right? Because they don't have specific experience there. And then the last one is level of attention, right? So my team usually say, hey, it's better to work with Bill Gates' team for 4 hours than to work with Tanner for 5 minutes, right? Because we would usually get objections where people would say, oh, but this guy says he'll work with me one-to-one. But it's like, yeah, but even if he does work with you one-to-one, he's either not gonna be as good, or B, he's not gonna work with you that long. So it's not really that helpful. So this is an example of what I call the 3 pillars that helps you drive home the point psychologically to get the customer to buy. And all you have to do is think, what in a perfect world does that customer want? And then you think of 3 points around your service and delivery that will support what they actually want, okay? Coming back to the fitness one, the way I would sell this is I would go, look, so now that you know you need to train and eat the way you want, now you have to decide who to hire. So you have 3 options. You get an in-person PT, you can get an online program like Beachbody, so we'll just call it BB, or you could hire me. And this is exactly how I would sound. Again, because I'm trying to just make sure you guys understand these points. So if you get a PT, that's fine, but the issue is that PTs are focusing on the 10% results working out and not the 90%, which is nutrition. So why would you want to pay an in-person PT that's focused on the 10% of results? And if you fire him, he doesn't get a paycheck, so he doesn't really want to teach you how to do it on your own. Why would you do that? That doesn't make any sense, because at the end of the day, you want to work with someone whose interest is aligned with yours. Number 2 is you could get an online program like Beachbody. Now Beachbody is great, it's cheap, I love cheap stuff, but the issue is they give everyone the same program. So if a 300-pound man has the same program as a 200-pound woman, that doesn't really make sense, right? They also set it up to where you'll get results really fast, so they get great transformation pictures, but then you can't stick with it because it's too rigorous, right? Super high cardio, very low amount of calories. Now, with me, the benefit here is that if you work with me one-to-one, not only am I going to teach you how to eat the way you want without sabotage results, not only am I going to train the way you want without sabotage results, but when you're done, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know so you never have to hire another trainer again. So would you rather pay a one-time high price fee, or would you rather pay $50 a month for the rest of your life? And they're like, oh, high price fee. And so by this point in the call, I've actually pre-sold them on my idea that this is exactly what they need. And it doesn't matter what offer this is or what company I build, I always have this part in the process so that when we get down to the closing, they always are ready to buy.